Religion, I believe, is a social construct. Now, spent a lot of time reading the various religious texts, and I've come to a conclusion that God is real, but there isn't a religion out there that is right about his name or his nature or anything about him. I believe religion is just a social construct to try to give meaning to humanity. I think most I think most people go to religion because they are afraid of death. Believe even if the religion doesn't preach a heaven like that of Buddhism, it it takes you out of uncertainty. You no longer wander this earth day in and day out with the uncertainty of what comes next in relation to Buddhism. You believe in karma and you believe in reincarnation. And you believe what you do has direct correlation with your lot in your next life. And I think just getting out of the uncertainty of life, I think that is why people cling to religion. I think that is why people cling to religion. And I think when you move past the fear of death, when you no longer fear your mortality, when you no longer think that it would be a great shame that it's all darkness after, or whatever it may be. I think you can move away from the idea of religion. I personally still believe in God. I think I think God is inevitable because the idea of God is a creator. And I think it's impossible that this was not created. Now, I don't know if God is benevolent. I don't know if God is watching his creation like we think, as we would think a God is. But I do think it was created, and I think by definition that means that whatever did that is God. But I think the idea of him being benevolent isn't, I mean, I would like to think so. I think deep down I believe he is, but I think it's another social human construct to place God as benevolent, as kind. I mean, there is evil in the world. So why is it that God is only the kindness? Why is that he's only the benevolent nature of humanity and not both? And I think it's all just cookie cutter things to fit into the human mold of what we want to hear. We want to hear that there's a heaven. We want to hear that the soul lives forever. We want to hear that no matter your lot in life, you can make it. We want to hear that it doesn't matter if you're a horrible person, as long as you believe you're fine. Those are the things that humans want to hear. They don't want to hear that it's only your works that will get you in. They don't want to hear that it's only if you are of the highest moral standard. They don't want to hear this. And that's why, I mean, Christianity, the biggest religion in the world, doesn't preach it. It preaches faith and you will get in. It preaches that your works don't matter. And I've thought about it for a long time and I just can't get past the idea that religion is just a social construct. And I mean, it makes sense. And I think that's why atheism is so prevalent in this day and age, which I think it's way better to be religious than atheist because you do need to look up to something higher. You do need to look up to something higher than your hedonistic whims. And I believe inherently we all have a still small voice that tells us the things we don't want to hear. And to me, that is God. To me, that is what we need to listen to. And to me, that is where morality, virtue, all these things come from. And the people who are atheists and believe, I think it's just, I do think it's far better to be religious than atheist, 100%. But I think even the smart atheist still are spiritual. And I think if you're spiritual, I think it's, I think in a way you still believe in something higher. You just don't want to call it God, and you just don't want to call it God, but you still believe in something higher than you. You still believe there's metaphysical stuff going on that we just don't understand. You still somehow, in some way or form, believe in a soul, and I think that's the biggest thing. But I think there's some atheists who just have it all wrong, and they are truly wretched for their beliefs. But I think that's what came with the scientific age. It came with this. That's what I was gonna say. I mean, when back in the day, it was, imagine being born, 4,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and I mean, you just gotta realize that the world that we see is so much different. The celestial bodies are not seen as they were in antiquity. There was not as much light pollution. When you looked up in the sky, you saw a night sky that none of us have ever seen before, unless you've actively sought out a place with no light pollution on a clear night with no moon. That's what you would get a glimpse into the ancient world. And how would you not believe that there is a God? How could you sit there and look up at that and think there's nothing? There's just, there's just nothing. It's insane. It's absurd. But as humans, we seek to understand. And I think everyone can see that. We do not enjoy uncertainty. We we would rather be certain and it be bad than be uncertain and be in some middle limbo where it could be good, could be bad. We want certainty. And I think that's what people strived for back in the day. And that's why from the earliest ancestors, they worshipped gods. They sacrificed, they did all these things. And in the scientific age, we can see past some of these illusions. We can predict the eclipse, hundreds of years away. So when the eclipse happens, and it's predicted, you don't go outside and think, there's divine retribution for the sin you committed yesterday. You think, this was predicted hundreds of years ago. This obviously today I woke up and there's an eclipse. I mean, someone 200 years ago could have told you that. And that took away, I mean, I think that's what breeds atheism in a certain degree. But I don't think that should. I think it should still, just because you can predict things doesn't mean there isn't a God who is starting the process of all things. But to me, it's foolish to think that somehow we got it right. I just have such a hard time believing that. That somehow, out of all the religions in the world, one of them is right. And only one of them could be right if it is truly right. And to me, it's foolish to think that we've got it right. Maybe if there was only one religion, it'd be more believable. But it's a social construct for certainty. It's something to give people peace of mind while they are here. Something people don't like thinking about death. People don't, as Steve Jobs said, even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And Christians presumably live their whole life to get to heaven. But they don't want to leave this temporal earthly, fleshly existence to get there. Why is that? Why is that? It says, discard your flesh, flee the flesh, don't be of this world. But still, the Christians, still, the religious people do not want to die to get where they know they are going, because they don't know, because nobody knows. And it's all just a social construct to make you have certainty while you are here. And then in your dying days, you are faced with the truth that you may be wrong, that you don't know. And yeah, but I do think God exists, and I do think we need to look up to something higher. And that's why I'm still, it could be, I'm not even saying it's a bad social construct. It may be the only social construct worth, it may be the social construct to have a good life. I think we need to believe in a God, in Plato's Republic. That was part of building the Republic, which is, building a society, which is a metaphor for building the individual self. There needs to be the society, the self needs to look up to a God. He says that. And he says yeah, Plato agreed in the Republic, we need to all look up to a God. And I'd see no reason to refute that. We need to look up to something higher than ourselves. But when Nietzsche said God is dead, I don't think Nietzsche was, I can never find the right word to explain what Nietzsche was saying, but he wasn't, it wasn't a wishful thing. He wasn't saying, God is dead and we killed him. He wasn't saying this in triumph. He was saying it, I believe, out of pity. It was an observation he made. He looked around, he said, God is dead and we killed him. That's what Nietzsche did. He wasn't proclaiming what he wanted. He was proclaiming what he saw. And I don't think you can argue with Nietzsche, because I don't think religion's ever been more lukewarm than it's been today. And Gandhi once said, there's nothing worse than religion without sacrifice. And in this day and age, I think all religion is without sacrifice. I see very few religious people making true sacrifices. And I'm not saying, you know, bringing the lamb to the slaughter. I mean, following the commandments of the word of God that you have been given. So few people do this. It's clear so few people nitpick the Bible. It's clear so few people fast. The Bible talks about fasting. So few Christians fast. And I guess I'm not trying to pick on Christians, but it's just what I'm most well versed in. And I see, you're supposed to fast. You don't do that. You're supposed to have chastity until marriage. Who does that? We're supposed to pray for those who persecute us. We're supposed to love our enemies. I mean, Christianity has killed millions of their enemies. I think, and I think you can always make the argument that that isn't true Christianity. And I would say you're right. But that's the same argument that all the people who still want to try communism make. They say, okay, well, what happened in Russia, that wasn't true Marxist communism. What happened in China, that wasn't true Marxist communism. What happened in, you know, Vietnam wasn't true Marxist communism. That's what people say. But to a certain degree, you have to realize that it's because the ideal is unobtainable. In a vacuum, the ideal may work, but in the real world, you cannot uphold the ideal. And when the ideal shatters, in communism's case, it's atrocities all the way up. And I think you see the same thing with Christianity. You know, there's it's failed time and time again. All religions have. All religions have committed atrocities for their God, and all religions have committed atrocities due to their moral excellence. And this isn't even really a video trying to bash on religion, but I've just recently, I've kind of always suspected it, but I've recently really accepted the conclusion that it's just a social construct, which I think is pretty obvious. But it kind of is it's not the best pill to swallow, because I did want to believe, because there's a lot of peace that comes in the ignorance of believing in that. And I may be wrong, obviously. I don't know. I may die and become face to face with Jesus, or, you know, Allah, or Buddha, or, somebody. And if that happens, I hope I am pitied for, because I'm not like I'm actively making these choices to live an unvirtuous life. I believe I'm making these choices in seek of truth and of virtue, and in a trying to find a way to make life on earth heaven, and not wait for a heaven that might not be certain. Because there has to be a better way to run the society. I think all religions have failed. And as I said, you may say, well, the religion hasn't been ran correctly. And then I'll just tell you that the ideal is wrong. Because obviously it's easy to draw up the perfect society. It's easy in a vacuum to draw up the perfect society when you don't take into account human nature, when you don't take into account things not going according to plan, when you don't take into account bad eggs, bad apples. It's easy to draw up the perfect social construct, the perfect society, the utopia. These things are easy to draw up. But the problem is that they only work in a vacuum, and human nature does not allow them to happen. And they've all failed. And I see no reason for them other than to make people happier, to get rid of the fear of death, of of death, because you don't really die if your soul never dies. And I honestly don't think the soul does die. I think there's too much to this being. But I don't think a religion got it right. I don't think we've had I don't think we've had higher beings come down from that place, inhabiting and telling, prophesizing. It's just hard to believe. And I prayed for faith. I've prayed for all these things, and I've not been blessed with them. So that's beside the point. The main point is that, really, that religion's a social construct, and that if it didn't make us feel better, if it didn't make us avoid coming to the terms of a eternal darkness, of eternal death, then we'd have no use for it. But looking up to something higher than us, I think is paramount for the good life. And I do believe in it. But I think it should come, I don't know. I almost think Nietzsche was right that we have to create our own morality. And inherently, I can see it in myself, a morality of excellence. And, maybe I'm too prideful. Maybe I'm too foolish. Maybe I'm everything. Maybe I'm all the above. Every bad thing in the book. But I think we all have the moral excellence in us. And if we could just listen to it, trust it, and go with it. We could create our own morality. We could view God as the still small voice, as the conscience, as the thing speaking to us. And we could learn through tradition and through repetition to listen to that thing better and to raise a society not around a single being, but around the higher self within us. And then that could make us morally excellent. That could make us, that is more believable to me. The body is not something that should be put on a pedestal, but the thing that inhabits the body is divine. And I think Nietzsche was right. I think God is dead, and we have no choice now but to create our own morality. And I think we should hop into that with willing arms and try to make it as morally excellent as possible, while taking into account bad apples, while taking into account human nature, while taking into account that we'll never live up to the ideal.